In tonight's news edition, Israeli occupation forces killed 2 Palestinians in occupied Jerusalem and the West Bank as a wave of heightened violence persists into its 5th month. U.S. planes carry out airstrikes against Daesh-linked militants in western Libya, killing some 40 people. And the European Union summit to negotiate new membership terms for Britain is forced into extra time. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. Jordan condemned a twin suicide attack that took place in northern Cameroon, killing 19 people and wounding 50 others. Minister of State for Media Affairs and Government spokesperson Mohammed al-Momani expressed Jordan's rejection of the terrorist attacks while reiterating the kingdom's firm stance against all terrorist acts that target innocent people all over the world. Furthermore, the minister stressed that Jordanian government's support to the government of Cameroon in its efforts to fight terrorism. He also offered condolences to the families of the victims and wished the injured a speedy recovery. Earlier today, 2 men walked into a market in Meme, northern Cameroon, and blew themselves up, killing and injuring dozens. So far, there has been no official claim of responsibility, but officials pointed the finger at Nigeria-based Boko Haram. Boko Haram has been blamed for a campaign of suicide attacks in neighboring countries over the past year, causing some 1,000 deaths. Israeli occupation forces shot dead 2 Palestinians in separate incidents in occupied Jerusalem and the West Bank as a wave of heightened violence continues into its 5th month. In Jerusalem, a Palestinian man stabbed 2 police officers outside the walled old city before they opened fire and killed him. A few hours later in the West Bank, a Palestinian man tried to ram his car into a group of Israeli soldiers who then shot him dead. Israeli forces have killed at least 164 Palestinians in a wave of bloodshed that has raised concerns of wider escalations in violence. A 3-month hunger strike by a Palestinian journalist accused of militancy on behalf of Hamas has prompted stern questions from the United Nations and European Union on Israel's policy of keeping prisoners in detention without charge. Mohammed al-Qiq, who was detained by Israeli occupation forces in November, is on the 86th day of a hunger strike in a hospital in northern Israel. The United Nations, EU, and rights group have expressed concern about Qiq, who is refusing any food or medical treatment, and denounced administrative detention. Israel placed him in what it called administrative detention, a practice that allows a prisoner to be held for up to 60 days without charge, without viewing evidence, and can be extended with a court approval. During a Security Council briefing yesterday, the UN envoy on Israeli-Palestinian peacemaking said detainees have the right to be informed about the charges underlying any detention, must be granted access to legal assistance, and be subject to a fair trial. Syrian rebels targeted government forces in Hama, Damascus, Aleppo, and Hims on a day U.S. and Russian military officials held talks in Geneva aimed at trying to secure a cessation of hostilities. The bilateral meeting between the U.S. and Russia was aimed at narrowing positions before the 2 powers jointly chair a United Nations meeting on the issue, but declined to give details. A diplomat close to the process said the idea of the whole meeting is for Russia and the United States to have a joint view. The larger meeting of the International Syria Support Group was supposed to have taken place at the United Nations earlier today. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov said Moscow hopes that agreements on a ceasefire in Syria will be reached. Turkey's military shelled positions of the Turkish YPG militia in northern Syria in response to cross-border fire. Turkey has repeatedly shelled YPG positions in recent days in response to the insurgents' advance near its border. Turkey considers the YPG a terrorist organization, causing friction with Washington, which backs the group in the fight against Daesh in Syria. Meanwhile, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said U.S.-supplied weapons had been used against civilians by a Syrian Kurdish militia group that Ankara blamed for a deadly suicide bombing, adding that they would talk to the U.S. President Barack Obama about the issue. He appeared to be referring to a U.S. airdrop of 28 bundles of military supplies in late 2014 meant for Iraqi Kurdish fighters near the Syrian city of Kobani. Responding to Erdogan's comments, U.S. State Department spokesman Mark Toner said the U.S. has not provided any weapon of any kind to the YPG. U.S. planes carried out airstrikes against Daesh-linked terrorists in western Libya, killing some 40 people in an operation linked to 2 deadly attacks last year in neighboring Tunisia. It was the second U.S. airstrike in 3 months against the terrorist group in Libya, who have exploited the political vacuum in the country to build up a presence on the southern shores of the Mediterranean Sea. A U.S. military officer said among those targeted was a senior Tunisian operative believed to be connected to 2 attacks last year in Tunis. The United Nations said humanitarian aid access in Yemen remains very limited, adding that the conflict had not cooled down as it creeps towards the 1-year mark. The UN said over 21 million people require some form of humanitarian protection or assistance as a result of the civil war. Though the UN announced that humanitarian aid has reached the embattled central city of Taiz for the first time this month, several parts of the country still remain unreachable.
The ongoing conflict is still as intense as it was. There hasn't been any shift in terms of the intensity. The same number of places where we are finding it difficult to access remain. There's been no increase in the opportunity to go to many of these places. Ground fighting, shelling and airstrikes are a common feature in many parts of Yemen, and as a result of that, the populations there are in a difficult situation.
A European Union summit to negotiate new membership terms for Britain was forced into extra time as Prime Minister David Cameron struggled to sell a deal to skeptical British voters in a referendum. After all-night negotiations, followed by a day of private meetings to try to narrow remaining differences, a senior EU official said the talks had hit critical snags. Here's more.
British Prime Minister David Cameron leaves the European Union summit after a long night debating the future of his country's membership. He wants a credible deal to sell to the British public, including concessions to sidestep EU regulation and cut immigration. While other members are digging in their heels, German Chancellor Angela Merkel is optimistic.
Everyone wished to keep Britain as a member of the European Union. All of Britain's different requests which were on the agenda were discussed, and it became clear that not everyone around the table found it all that easy to agree to those requests, but there is a will.
Talks will continue on the second day of the summit. No country has ever voted to leave the European Union. A British exit could deal a blow to the UK economy and certainly damage the EU's standing and self-confidence.
We begin sports with Formula One. Ferrari showed off what they hope will be a Mercedes-beating car with the target of fighting for the Formula One championship right to end of the season. Ferrari have not won a driver's title since Finland's Kimi Räikkönen, who is still with the team, won in 2007. They were last constructors' champions in 2008. Testing starts in Barcelona on Monday. The first race on a record 21-round calendar is in Australia on March 20th.
Se poi diventerà un'auto vincente, credo entri direttamente.
Top seeds Rafael Nadal and David Ferrer continued on the path to a final showdown after both secured wins at the ATP Rio Open. World number 1 seeded Nadal downed fellow Spaniard Nicolas Almagro 6-3, 7-5, while second seed Ferrer needed 3 sets to get past Spaniard Albert Ramos 4-6, 6-1, 6-4. And finally, relatively cold conditions continue for the rest of tonight, with some low clouds and northwesterly moderate to brisk winds. A slight drop in temperature is expected tomorrow, with relatively cold weather in hilly areas and warm in the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea. Light rain is also possible in the northern regions, while winds will be northwesterly moderate to brisk. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect warm conditions tomorrow, with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. Israeli occupation forces killed 2 Palestinians in occupied Jerusalem and the West Bank as a wave of heightened violence persists into its 5th month. U.S. planes carry out airstrikes against Daesh-linked terrorists in western Libya, killing some 40 people. And the European Union summit to negotiate new membership terms for Britain is forced into extra time. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.